I am really excited about today's video because it involves my three favorite things: afternoon tea, baking, and history, especially English history. The Victoria sandwich cake is the perfect cake for afternoon tea, not just because it tastes wonderful, but because it's one of the original items you would have found on the afternoon tea menu. Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Sonia and I'm very happy you stopped by. You know, various types of sponge cakes had been around for a long time before afternoon tea became a thing. But Queen Victoria liked this one so much that it eventually acquired her name, the Victoria sandwich cake, which today you'll often hear called the Victoria sponge cake. Now, whatever you call it, today's cake looks very different from the one Queen Victoria would have eaten in the 1800s. Today's cakes are often made up of thick, round layers and filled with a generous amount of jam and cream, whipped cream or buttercream. Then the top is dusted with powdered sugar and sometimes piled with fresh strawberries on the top. I mean, it can be quite a showstopper. But much of that was added in the 20th century. Modern bakers' idea of gilding the lily, if you will. The cakes had possibly been around longer, but in 1861, about 20 years after the practice of afternoon tea got started, a woman by the name of Isabella Beeton wrote Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management, and in it she included the recipe for the Victoria sandwich cakes, presumably the first time the recipe had been published. In her directions, home cooks were told to bake the cake in a Yorkshire pudding pan, which in those days was square or oblong. Then once baked and cooled, slice it in half, fill it with jam or marmalade, and then cut it into fingers like finger sandwiches. The fingers were to be stacked crosswise on a glass plate and served with castor sugar, otherwise known as superfine sugar, sprinkled on the top. So that's what I'm doing today, making the Victoria sandwich cake the way Queen Victoria and her friend, the Duchess of Bedford, who is credited with creating afternoon tea, would have enjoyed it. So let's get started. Okay, the oven's on, the apron's on, we're ready to go. By the way, I am preheating the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 180 degrees Celsius or gas mark 4. Now I have here a 9 by 9 inch or 23 by 23 inch, 9 by 9 inch or 23 by 23 centimeter baking pan that I have greased with butter, and I've also lined it with some parchment paper here at the bottom. Now ordinarily after buttering you dust the pan with a little flour, right? Well, the Victorians used to, especially for sponge cakes, they would dust with sugar, with castor sugar. If you don't have castor sugar, that's fine. Granulated sugar works just fine here, but I have done it with castor sugar, and we're going to set that aside. What I love about this cake is it is so simple. There are only a few ingredients. You've got eggs, flavor extract, flour, sugar, and butter. That's it. But there are a lot of tips which can make or break this recipe. First off, all the items need to be at room temperature, and the amount of flour, sugar, and butter is based entirely on the weight of your eggs. So if you weigh your eggs and they turn out to be 150 grams, then that means you're going to have 150 grams of flour, 150 grams of sugar, etc., etc. It's always the equal weight to the eggs. Now, here's the question. Do you weigh the eggs in the shell or out of the shell? Most recipes I see that talk about weighing the eggs, if they say, and a lot of them don't, but if they say, they will say, weigh the eggs in the shell. My argument with that is that the shell plays no part in the recipe. I would rather weigh the eggs out of the shell, and then everything has an even ratio. A lot of those same recipes that recommend weighing in the shell will also sometimes say if the batter is too thick, you can always add a tablespoon or two of milk to it to kind of loosen things up a little bit. I'm thinking if everything is even, you might not need to do that. So for today's recipe, I have 3 large eggs at room temperature, and I've weighed them. They turned out to be 153 grams. Then I have a half teaspoon of almond extract. Now, every other recipe calls for vanilla extract, if it calls for any at all in this kind of Victoria sandwich cake recipe. But in the olden days, the Victorians used to add a little crushed almond to their cake batter in order to help it last longer, help the cakes last longer. So for just a hint of that history, I like using almond extract instead of vanilla. Now, if you don't like almond extract or you don't have it, that's absolutely fine. Vanilla extract works just fine. Then I have 153 grams of self-rising flour. Now, self-rising flour includes the baking powder and salt. If you don't have self-rising flour on your pantry shelf, I don't keep it either. I don't buy it, but I make it. So I will put in the description box how to quickly make your own self-rising flour. It's not a big deal. So 153 grams of that. 153 grams of white sugar. Now, I am using castor sugar, which is superfine sugar. Granulated sugar in this recipe does work, but castor sugar will dissolve better, it will incorporate better. So if you can add a superfine sugar or castor sugar, that is going to work a little bit better. Also, you can make that too if you don't have it or can't find it, just by putting a little granulated sugar in a spice mill and pulsing that a few times. That will make your sugar finer and you'll come out with superfine or castor sugar. So 153 grams of that and 153 grams of unsalted butter at room temperature. So with my butter at room temperature, I am going to beat the butter until it is nice and fluffy. Looks pretty good. Now I'm going to add the sugar and the extract and cream them together. Now I've beat my eggs until they're really frothy, so I'm going to put in just a little at a time and whip those in. All right, we're done with that bit. Now, I want to fold in or slowly stir in my flour. Stirring in keeps from losing a lot of the air that you have whipped in, or beaten in, if you will, to the batter. And no doubt about it, this is a thick batter. Okay, and now time to pour it into our prepared pan. Not really pouring it as much as you're scooping it. See if I can get it where you can see it better. See better what I'm doing. And you just kind of want to coax it to the corners. I don't want to lose any of that wonderful batter. That's the reason I keep going over and over. Trying to get every last bit out. Okay, all right. Now, into the oven it goes for about 30 minutes or until a toothpick comes out clean. Ooh, sounds like our cake is done. Let's see if it passes the toothpick test. I think we're good to go. Oops. My oven still telling me it's done. All right, I'm going to leave this in the pan for another 10 minutes and then turn it out onto the wire rack and let it completely cool before we do anything else. Okay, our cake has cooled down. It took a little longer than 20 minutes. It was more like twice that, about 40 minutes. But either way, it is cooled now, and I have sliced it in half. And now I am going to put on, I've got a half a cup here of raspberry jam. Let's see how much I need. This particular jam is seedless. I love raspberries, and I love raspberry jam, but I'm not a great fan of the seeds. So I was able to find seedless jam, and thought this would be a better choice. I think I am going to use all of this. This is a half cup. If I need to, I can always add a little bit more too. You don't want to get it too thick, because once you put on the top and then squish it down and start slicing it, you run the risk of it kind of all gushing out the sides and you don't have anything in the center. You could use strawberry jam, you could use apricot jam, lemon curd would be wonderful on this cake. Now I'm going to put the top on it, top half on. And do we have any of it gushing out the sides? Not too bad, a little bit, not too bad. Now then, I think I'll slice it this way first. You want to saw very easily back and forth. Let the weight of the knife do the work for you. And I am going to wipe off my knife as I do this. And then you just want to cut your fingers, so to speak. Look, I'm gonna get 12 instead of 10. Even better. I'm gonna go over this, dusting it with a little castor sugar. And I think we're good to go. Now let's have tea. And there you have it. Lovely Victoria sandwich cakes. They're light, spongy, and the jam gives it a tart sweetness without it being overwhelming. By the way, any jam, like I said, of your choosing would be good. Raspberry, strawberry, apricot, lemon curd would be a delightful filling for this cake. Now, if you want to assemble this cake the modern way and include cream in the middle, you can do that. It is quite yummy. But I like the idea of having this cake the way Queen Victoria and her ladies-in-waiting and fellow Victorians would have done. Also, without the cream, you can store this cake at room temperature, if you have any left. I hope you'll give this recipe a try. It's so easy and oh so good with your favorite cup of tea. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more afternoon tea videos. Until next time, bye-bye.